So one last question and then we'll...
In the example of the children with the marshmallow, what do you suppose would happen if two children are in the room at the same time with the same instruction?
Yeah.
One ate the marshmallow, would the other one resist?
I think that would be very difficult in most cases. So there's a whole slew of social psychology experiments. The craziest one, actually it's kind of a cruel one, is you bring in one subject into the room. There are 5 other people sitting there who are your research assistants. That's the setup. And then the researcher presents 3 lines and then another line and asks you to say, well, which of the 3 lines is the same length as this other one. And the Confederates all intentionally give the wrong answer. In most cases, you find that the subject just also gives the wrong answer. And if you ask them later, they all say, yeah, I knew these guys were giving the wrong answer, but I thought I must have missed something. So social pressure is a really powerful thing. It doesn't take too many people to do it. All right, so let me move on to the next section. What do we do with all this? How do we apply it? Everything I've told you is mostly a lab study. Does this really work in the real world? So here are examples of studies that we're working on, things other people have done that'll start to give you a sense for how all this works out. So this is a study that we're still analyzing the data on, but this was to deal with this problem of diabetics being at high risk of cholesterol-related diseases. And as many of you probably know, there's whole drugs like Lipitor, which is statins, are very cheap, and it's an easy treatment for cholesterol, but most people don't take it. So partnering with Medicaid in the state of Oklahoma, we ran a study to see how we could get people to do this. And what they were doing, traditionally, they were sending the usual letter, please talk to your doctor about statins, something like that. And we just changed that letter. So what we changed about it was we added some salient facts to it. Okay, that increases your attention to this. But then we made sure we were dealing with this channel factor problem. So rather than some vague, talk to your doctor about this, we gave very specific instructions on what people should ask, how, when, and so on. And then lastly, this I think was the big change. So we sent people a Post-it note that was a fridge magnet, so they could put it up on their fridge as something useful they would use, but on it was a little reminder, have you talked to your doctor about cholesterol medications. Now, I would have brought the letter to show you what it looked like versus the traditional one, but we're not allowed to because of confidentiality, unfortunately. So this is an example of just changing a direct mail message with a couple of behavioral elements that help move things along. The next study comes from financial services. Right? So you've all read about the foreclosure crisis. About 1 in 6 people are past due on their mortgage. About 1 in 8 are seriously delinquent and are facing foreclosure. About a third of those are already in foreclosure. And, the government's pumped a ton of money into helping these people via a loan modification program, which for those of you who don't know what that is, essentially what that does is you reduce the monthly payment by lowering the rate on the mortgage, so the mortgage becomes affordable. But the uptake on that program has been very low, even though it's been running for 2 years now. Only about 1/4 of the people who are eligible have received these modifications. So what's going on? A lot of people blame, like, oh, the banks are terrible, their processes are messy, they're messing up. Some people say, well, these government programs are too complicated. They're changing all the time. The servicers, the banks say, oh, we can't keep it all straight. Other people say, oh, consumers are trying to take undue advantage of all of this. They're being strategic. They're walking away. They're trying to get a loan modification when they don't need it. So what is really the problem? If you start thinking about it from a rational perspective, okay, I'm in trouble. I've got a ton of paperwork to go through just to solve my financial problem, and the loan modification process is more complicated than applying for a mortgage in the first place. So I have to go through a whole bunch of paperwork to do this. But I mean, I get a ton of money at the end of that. Right? It's a huge benefit. I could save hundreds of dollars a month. I mean, this is worth tens of thousands of dollars to consumers. So why does some paperwork and some complexity and some mess get in the way? Right? You find that of the people that banks actually manage to contact, a small fraction make it through the whole process. Right? One bank even told us that after a 6-month-long process of paperwork, making trial payments, and so on, at the last step where all you have to do is sign the final agreement, get it notarized, and send it back, 40% drop out. They just fail to send back the papers. And so we started looking at this problem from a psychological perspective, and what we found is throughout the process, there are a lot of little things that get in the way that cause people to drop out that have to do with two aspects. One is they cause people to lose trust in the system. Right? So yeah, they're asking me to do a lot of paperwork, but this is not really going to work. They don't know what they're doing, or they don't really want to help me. And once you believe that, it's very easy to drop out. Right? And the other is that people just get confused. There's some step that is actually pretty hard to do, and it just trips people up. And there's no help for that. So what we've done is we've designed a whole different way of engaging with the borrower that mostly deals with the scripts and how the collections agents talk to people. And we're kind of a couple of weeks away from launching that with a small mortgage bank to test it out. But it deals with things like whenever you call the collections shop, even if it's the 10th time, they'll ask you to verify your name, address, social security number, and your phone number. But they don't explain that this is just a security fraud detection requirement. Right? It makes you feel like they don't know who you are, you have to repeat your story. So simply saying, look, you've done this before, I just need to do this for security purposes, let's go through the verification. Simply adding that preface now makes me feel like, oh yeah, okay, this person knows what they're doing. Right, so that's the type of change we're making there. Here's an example from energy conservation. So we work with a company called O-Power. What these guys do is they send you letters like this. The bars show your energy consumption. And if you're doing, well, you get a good, but let's say you were higher than all your neighbors, then you would get a frowning face. And if you were better than the efficient neighbors, you would get, the great there with 2 smiley faces. And so what is the effect? 2 to 3% reduction in electricity use. You might feel, well, what's 2 to 3%? That's nothing. If you start working through the numbers, you would have to raise prices by 18 to 30% based on different estimates of price elasticity to get the same amount of reduction. This adds up to $900 million a year if this was done nationally, and that's more than the entire solar industry combined, right, from sending letters. Just telling people you're not keeping up with the Joneses. Right. So social proof, very powerful. And here's the retirement example that some of you may have seen. Most of you have gone through this process, hopefully, of enrolling for a 401k plan or retirement plan, or when you get your job. It's one of the many forms you have to fill out. It might sit there for a few weeks. Eventually, you get around to it. Right, so in this study, what they did was they said, well, why are we asking people to actively go fill out this form? Right? Why don't we just sign people up at some low contribution level? They can just cancel. They can change it. So that way, if they do nothing, which a lot of people were doing, it turned out, they're at least signed up in the meantime. And we can see how many people change. Right? So you might expect that, oh, okay, you start with a really high uptake when you just sign people up automatically, and eventually that would kind of converge, right, over some time. People would cancel, and people would eventually get around to signing up if they weren't automatically enrolled. But here's what happens. So the green and blue lines are when the enrollment is not automatic. Okay, so you start with about 20%, and this is 4 years, so this is months on the x-axis. Right? So 4 years later, you eventually get to 40% of people signed up. I mean, boy, some people really procrastinate, right, signing up for this thing. Or maybe after the 20th education session, they finally do it. But look what happens when you automatically enroll people. So that's this red line here. You start with a very high percentage, right? And no one cancels. 4 years later, no one cancels. So it's not that by choosing these defaults for people, we're forcing them into actions they don't want. Right? This study shows that people don't cancel. This is a great little device that the guys at the Media Labs cooked up, and then there's a company called Vitality that now sells it. So they call them a glow cap. What this thing is, it's a little cap that fits on standard prescription bottles. Right? And it's designed to help drug adherence. So what it'll do is, it's got a little cell phone embedded in it, and it's got a beeper and a light. So when it's time for you to take your drug, the thing starts blinking. Then it starts beeping. 2 hours later, if you still haven't taken the pill, then it will call your phone. Okay? And better yet, every month it will, actually this is their little diagram for it, which is hard to read, but they'll even send a report to you by email every month, and a family member or a friend that you choose saying how well you've done on taking your drugs. It creates social pressure. It'll even automatically order your refills. Right, so a great little example of what we call a commitment device. So something that makes it difficult to back out of things you need to do. And here's a fun one. If you have difficulty getting out of bed, this is yet another Media Lab invention that's now sold commercially. Clocky will, when you hit the snooze button on it, it actually hops off the table and it goes and looks for a place to hide. So you have to get out of bed, you have to chase this thing around, you have to grab it and turn it off, and by then you're pretty much out of bed. So I got one as a retirement present when I left Oliver Wyman, and I tried it out. It actually hides very fast. And then the last example I want to show you, this is something that CVS has done. There's a forthcoming academic paper on this that'll analyze these results more thoroughly. But they were trying to get more people to sign up for automatic refills. So the current process is you go to the website, you enter your prescription, the prescription is filled, and then when you receive it, you get a choice. Would you like to sign up for automatic refills? And they weren't getting as much uptake as they would like. So they changed one little simple thing. They asked the question at the time of plugging in the prescription. Right? And they claim that this has had a 2x impact on uptake. So the academic paper will do more thorough analysis. We'll understand more about the baseline. But what's going on here is that when you've already filled the prescription, you're not thinking about filling prescriptions. Right? You're thinking about receiving your pills. When you are entering the prescription, that is when you're suffering the pain of this manual process. That is when you're thinking, oh, automatic, wow, that'll make it much easier. Right? I'm doing this at the last minute. I'd like to avoid forgetting next month or in 3 months. So that was just the right time to insert the choice. So this is playing into realizing where people's attention is focused. right? And hitting the choices according to that.